Holmes was certainly not a difficult man to live with. He was quiet in his ways, and his habits were regular. It was rare for him to be up after 10 at night, and he had invariably breakfasted and gone out before I rose in the morning. Sometimes he spent his day at the chemical laboratory, sometimes in the dissecting rooms, and occasionally in long walks, which appeared to take him into the lowest portions of the city. Nothing could exceed his energy when the working fit was upon him, but now and again a reaction would seize him, and for days on end he would lie upon the sofa in the sitting room, hardly uttering a word or moving a muscle, from morning to night. On these occasions I have noticed such a dreamy, vacant expression in his eyes that I might have suspected him of being addicted to the use of some narcotic, had not the temperance and cleanliness of his whole life forbidden such a notion. As the weeks went by, my interest in him and my curiosity as to his aims in life gradually deepened and increased. His very person and appearance were such as to strike the attention of the most casual observer. In height he was rather over 6 feet, and so exceedingly lean that he seemed to be considerably taller. His eyes were sharp and piercing, save during those intervals of torpor to which I have alluded, and his thin, hawk-like nose gave his whole expression an air of alertness and decision. His chin, too, had the prominence and squareness which mark the man of determination. His hands were invariably blotted with ink and stained with chemicals, yet he was possessed of extraordinary delicacy of touch, as I frequently had occasion to observe when I watched him manipulating his fragile philosophical instruments. The reader may set me down as a hopeless busybody when I confess how much this man stimulated my curiosity, and how often I endeavored to break through the reticence which he showed on all that concerned himself. Before pronouncing judgment, however, be it remembered how objectless was my life, and how little there was to engage my attention. My health forbade me from venturing out unless the weather was exceptionally genial, and I had no friends who would call upon me and break the monotony of my daily existence. Under these circumstances, I eagerly hailed the little mystery which hung around my companion, and spent much of my time in endeavoring to unravel it. That, my friends, was from A Study in Scarlet, the very first Sherlock Holmes story. Welcome, my friends, welcome to the mysterious Vaughan Manor, and welcome to the very first Sherlock Saturday, where we'll be talking about Sherlock Holmes stories every week on Saturday. So today, A Study in Scarlet, the very first Sherlock Holmes story, which was written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who was born May 22nd, 1859, and died July 7th, 1930. A very talented writer, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Now, before I get started, I wanted to thank my good friend Aj Dunn for sending me a present, which is appropriate for today's Sherlock Saturday. He sent me this mug, and look, it's the casebook of Sherlock Holmes. It's a reproduction of the old Penguin Classics edition of the casebook of Sherlock Holmes. So that's appropriate. Thank you, Aj Dunn. That was very nice of you. You are a very kind person. So, Aj Dunn, thanks, my friend. And it's a Penguin Classics, so I can drink out of this on my Sunday Penguin as well, and it will be equally appropriate. So today's story, the very first Sherlock Holmes story, is The Study in Scarlet. It was published in 1887 in Beeton's Christmas Annual, of all places. An interesting little book. It's a short little novel. And of course, the most important thing about the story, A Study in Scarlet, is that it's the first Sherlock Holmes story, and it is the story that Watson meets Sherlock Holmes, and their great literary partnership begins. So it's a pretty awesome story. Very, very important in the Sherlock Holmes saga. And we owe it all to Stanford. Thanks, Stanford. You see, Watson had just gotten back from the war. It was the Second Anglo-Afghan War, and Watson was a medical doctor during the war, and he was injured quite badly, either in the shoulder or the leg. It's a mystery where he was really injured. Maybe he was injured in both places. He refers to this injury in different parts of his body in different stories. So it's been a cause of contention among Sherlock Holmes scholars. They talk a lot about it in my annotated editions of Sherlock Holmes. But whether it was in the leg or the shoulder, he was injured and he was recovering in London. And he needed a cheap place to live because he didn't have a lot of cash, our man Watson. And then he runs into his old friend, Stanford. And they hang out, and he tells Stanford, man, if only I could find somebody to share the rent with, because I'm broke. And Stanford says, you know what? You ought to meet my good friend, Sherlock Holmes, because he was telling me that he needs somebody to share the rent with. And Watson's like, cool, hook us up. So Stanford does. Stanford takes Watson down to the local hospital where Sherlock Holmes is in the laboratory, and he's working on a blood test that can test whether old stains are blood or not, or something along those lines. And that is how they meet. And they agree to move in together and just see how it goes. So Stanford, who never ever again appears in a Sherlock Holmes story, he does a really good service for us Sherlock Holmes fans by getting these two together. So Watson goes to live with Sherlock Holmes, but you know, as you could tell from the little bit that I read you, Sherlock Holmes, keeps to himself. He's not really trusting. He doesn't really know Watson, so he doesn't tell Watson what he does for a living. So Watson has no idea, but Watson has nothing else to do, so he's like, you know, what is this guy up to all the time? What does Sherlock Holmes do for a living? Eventually, Sherlock Holmes decides to tell Watson, because Watson, you know, he's such a good, decent fella, and Sherlock Holmes could see that. So one day he just, you know, up and takes him to work, and he takes him to the scene of a crime, and Watson learns that Sherlock Holmes is the world's only consulting detective. You see, when Scotland Yard was in a fix and they couldn't figure out what the heck was going on at a crime scene, or they couldn't solve a mystery, they would call in Sherlock Holmes, who would get to work and figure it out for them. And I get the feeling they needed Sherlock Holmes a lot, because these detectives on the force didn't seem to be particularly bright. So, yeah, they really needed Sherlock Holmes in Scotland Yard at this time, apparently. So, the most important thing about A Study in Scarlet is, of course, the meeting between Watson and Holmes, which becomes one of the most interesting and enduring friendships in literature. And it's very interesting if you read the Sherlock Holmes stories in the order that they were published as books, and that is the way I recommend that you do it. You will see their relationship develop and just how much they come to depend upon each other and what close friends they become. And they really form a bond of trust. And eventually, Sherlock Holmes, who is the ice-cold man of reason, he seems cold, he seems aloof, distant, actually starts to really care about Watson, and you see that. Watson gradually humanizes Sherlock Holmes, who is a cold, rational, thinking machine in the beginning of the Sherlock Holmes adventures. But he's not, of course. Sherlock Holmes is as human as the rest of us. He's just a lot smarter and more observant. Uh, and he gradually warms up a little bit. And Watson humanizes Holmes to a great degree. They have a great relationship, and it's one of the best things, if not the best things, about the Sherlock Holmes mysteries, other than the mysteries, which are pretty good. The mystery in Study in Scarlet is pretty good. Watson learns all about Sherlock Holmes' science of deduction. In fact, Watson is reading an article about the science of deduction, and he thinks it's ridiculous, and he points it out to Holmes, and Holmes is like, yeah, I wrote that. And Holmes goes about telling Watson about the science of deduction. Now, Holmes, he can look at you, he can tell from like a spot on your shoe where you've been for the last 7 days. He can like look at your hat and be like, oh yeah, I know what you've been up to. Because he can look at you, and he doesn't just see you, he observes. And so he will observe you and find out, and he can figure out from his observations, for the most part, who you are, what kind of person you are, what you've been up to, all kinds of stuff you wouldn't think that he could figure out, but he does. Smart guy, this Sherlock Holmes. And so he takes Watson to this crime scene, and there's been a murder, and a man is found dead in an empty house. And on the wall, in scarlet lettering, is the word Rache, or I think that's how you pronounce the word. It's R-A-C-H-E, which apparently is German for revenge. And so that's what the detectives at Scotland Yard just figure, oh, it's a revenge thing. Sherlock Holmes isn't quite so sure. That could be a blind, an obvious one, he points out. But he goes all around the crime scene, takes out his magnifying glass, does his whole deal, figures out an awful lot about the killer that the inspectors don't know. And this is important, this story, for another reason, because we are introduced to a couple characters who we will see later on, Inspectors Gregson and Lestrade. Lestrade is probably the more important character. You see them both again, but Lestrade is the important one. I like Lestrade a lot. I have a feeling that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle liked him as well. So, Sherlock Holmes sets out to solve this murder. I'm not going to give you too many details of the murder plot, because I know a lot of you folks haven't read Sherlock Holmes, and man, you should, and you should start right at Study in Scarlet. That should be your first stop with Sherlock Holmes. And if you have a big volume like this, a big complete Sherlock Holmes, the books in this giant volume, they will be in the order of publication as they were published as books. Like I said, that's the way I recommend them. So you're going to get a Study in Scarlet first. The mystery is interesting. It's not the best mystery that Sherlock Holmes comes across. But it is interesting, and the way it's written is interesting. You have Sherlock Holmes solving the case, figure out who the dead man is, who the murderer is, and he solves the case in the first half of the story. But then there's a part two, and the part two travels away from London, far away to some other place. And we see how the crime developed. We see the genesis of the crime itself. And so the story of the crime is told to us, at least the motivation behind it. And so it's a whole big section of the novel. And the first time I came across it, I was a little surprised by that. And I was like, man, just get back to Sherlock Holmes. That's who I want to be spending time with. But it actually turned out to be a really interesting story. So I didn't mind so much once I got into it. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle will do that. He will break away from the action, particularly in the novels, to tell this huge backstory. And he takes his time about doing it. There are 4 Sherlock Holmes novels. And the rest of the Sherlock Holmes stories are short stories. For the most part, I think his short story mysteries worked better than the novels did, with the exception of The Hound of the Baskervilles, which is one of the best detective novels you will ever read. That was a masterpiece. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who I will talk more about probably within the next couple Sherlock Saturdays, but suffice it to say about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is he had a great style of writing. Even though he was writing 100 years ago, you can follow his writing perfectly. He's very clear. He's very direct. He had a no-nonsense style of writing that is just excellent for the stories that he tells. And he had an imagination. He came up with a lot of different mysteries. Some of the mysteries are suspiciously similar to each other. But for the most part, he had a great imagination. He came up with some great mysteries. He came up with a lot of great books, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, that had nothing to do with Sherlock Holmes. But his Sherlock Holmes stories, fantastic. And the way they're written is just great. Easy to get into. They flow really well. They have a great pace. And the characters are amazing. So Sherlock Holmes, A Study in Scarlet. I certainly highly recommend this novel and the Sherlock Holmes stories in general. I hope you will join me once again here at stately Vaughan Manor for future Sherlock Saturdays. And catch me tomorrow for the Sunday Penguin. No, I don't take the holidays off. No. Tomorrow will be a very American Sunday Penguin. So catch me then and have a great day. Bye, guys.